There are indications we could end hurricane season on a pretty active note. What's going on, guys? I'm certified meteorologist Jonathan Kagas. In this video, I want to first show you the climatology, where we would typically look for storms to develop and then move. Then I'm going to show you the meteorology behind why I think we could see an uptick in activity by the middle part of October on the Atlantic side. And then we'll break down the super hot Western Caribbean. Kind of shows you where I think the development's going to be, but it is really hot. It is record hot, in fact. Before we get into the video, if you want to stay updated on the rest of hurricane season, you have to hit subscribe. Please do that. If you like the weather in general and find this content helpful, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help us out a lot. So here we go. This is where we would now look as we flip the calendar page into October. We shut down the Cabo Verde season. Those are those long track big storms that roll off of Africa and work their way through the main development region of the Atlantic. Now it's closer to home. Couple of things that drive the October tropical activity. We have the Central American Gyre. It's a semi-permanent area of low pressure. It's prominent early in the year and then late in the year. So we typically look for that again to be a region of thunderstorm development around here. And every now and then, those storms could develop either on the Pacific side or on the Atlantic basin side. So that is one area that we watch for the Central American Gyre storms. Then, if you have been watching from the United States mainland, we've had a couple of these nice cold fronts to send us into fall. These become more common as we move into October, of course, to deliver some cooler air down. But every now and then, like we've already seen with Ophelia, these kind of get hung up over the warm waters of the Gulf or Southwest Atlantic and then fire off storms right in here, and then those will track to the north. I also want to point out the steering current here, so we're really looking for those cold fronts too. Notice these arrows that are on your screen that are kind of lifting up out of the Caribbean. That is because these dips in the jet stream, the troughs that we look at, those become more common as well. Again, Canada is sending us the cooler air right down to the lower 48. And when we get these dips in the jet stream coming across the country like this, any storm that's kind of right in here tends to feel that tug. The trough kind of lifts it up out of the Caribbean and then takes it into the Gulf of Mexico, and then typically then sends it back to the east within the westerlies that are also starting to gain strength as we get deeper into fall and into the cooler season. So that is why the climatological tracks, again, favor this area and then a general motion then up towards the Atlantic seaboard. So keep that in mind as we move forward. So that is the climatology. Now I want to introduce you to the Madden-Julian Oscillation. If you are a weather nerd, you likely have heard of this before. And what this basically is, it's a convective complex of thunderstorms that circles the globe every 30 to 60 days. What this means for Atlantic activity are those numbers you see on your screen. So let me bring out my yellow telestration again. You see it here. Here's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. These are zones around the world that it moves through. For us, that we are kind of keeping our eyes open for on the Atlantic side, it's number 8, 1, 2, and 3. And specifically this time of the year, well, at least what the forecast model is showing, all these little yellow lines are the ensemble forecast. You kind of see that bending around here. We're over here right now, but as we get towards October 13th, note a bunch of these yellow lines curve around through number 8 and through number 1. You see at the top of your screen here, I have written out that 8 and 1 are favorable for the Gulf of Mexico and Western Caribbean. 2 and 3 are more for the main development region of the Atlantic and helps to get thunderstorm activity going there. So we would already, right off the bat, by looking at this, it's like, okay, the Madden-Julian Oscillation is going to be moving into a favorable spot, tropical development-wise, for that development as we move through the middle part of October, right as it moves through number 8 and number 1. I want to show you something else, kind of more of an illustration. So this basically is representing the same kind of thing. We are looking at the anomalies here. This is basically rising motion here, where you see these darker greens showing up, this green blob over the Pacific. That basically means that we have more rising motion, more upper level divergence than what we would typically have this time of the year. The darker the green, the bigger the anomaly. So we have a huge anomaly in the Eastern Pacific. So putting 2 and 2 together here, we would have a Madden-Julian Oscillation pass, which would help to increase the rising motion in the Eastern Pacific. And then therefore, we would think that we are going to have an increase in tropical systems in the Eastern Pacific. Take a mental picture here, and we're going to come back to this. So this is for the first week of October. This is through October 8th. We're going to go through the middle of October to see what happened. It moved from the eastern Pacific. There's still a nice big blob right over Central America that is likely induced in part from the Central American gyre being there, enhanced by the Madden-Julian Oscillation passage. But you see the green, the anomaly spreading, here's the United States, by the way, over the Gulf of Mexico, over the Western Caribbean, and Southwest Atlantic. So now we have that favorable oomph, that favorable push from the MJO coming into the Atlantic side. And we saw that again on the wheel. I'll go back to it again, getting into number 8 and number 1. That's that pass again that would make things more favorable for us. So we're going to go back to the Eastern Pacific. So again, just by looking at this and then knowing that the MJO is coming into phase, we would expect tropical activity to blossom in the Eastern Pacific here, west of Central America, west of Mexico, over the next week to 10 days. Look at what happens. This is the European ensemble now. We're looking at all the clusters of L's, and you see this is through October 9th. We have one big cluster here, and then another big cluster here. So from that Madden-Julian Oscillation passage, we are likely going to get two pretty significant storms to develop west of Mexico, and then one of these could actually go right up in here and bring a lot of moisture to the desert Southwest again, and then in through Texas. This is where Texas gets a lot of its rain this time of the year too, by these systems that develop here and then move up in that direction. But that is a story for another time. The point I'm trying to make with this is that we know the MJO is out there, we saw the anomalies, and now the models are picking up on all of that as well. So we have great confidence that that is going to happen through the next week to 10 days in the Eastern Pacific. That anomaly, again, pushes further to the east and then enters the Atlantic basin side, which would favor development in the Gulf, in the Western Caribbean specifically. And again, that meets up with climatology. So you have the double-edged sword that we would really favor activity there, as we have even kind of like climatology on steroids, so to speak. We have that little injection of convection from the MJO. I want to end with this, and I kind of alluded to this at the early part of the video here, that I wanted to talk about the potential fuel. We call it tropical cyclone heat potential, and this is basically the measurement of not only the warmth of the water, but the depth of the warmth of that water. We have record hot temperatures on the surface in the Western Caribbean, but that heat also extends at a very, very big depth. Look at all of this dark peach color and red color here. The tropical cyclone heat potential is very high. It's extreme in some cases. It's almost maxing out the color table that we have here. From the western side of Haiti through Jamaica, and then right smack dab in here where you saw those anomalies. And I'll go back and show you again. I'll bring that map back right in through here. So if we are going to get something to develop in the Western Caribbean or Gulf of Mexico, this thing, given the lack of wind shear, is going to have a very strong potential to be a very formidable storm somewhere in the Western Caribbean if the other components shake out. And again, it looks like we are going to have a favorable environment courtesy of the Madden-Julian Oscillation. Once we get deeper into real time, we'd have to break down, okay, the wind shear, what is actually going to be steering these things. But nonetheless, I'll go back to the favorability map, what I like to call it again. It's the rising motion anomaly. But look at it right there. Again, Bay Campeche into Western Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico, right in here. Again, this is the United States. It looks like we're going to have a favorable environment, unfortunately, for development as we move forward through the middle part. I can't remember if I mentioned the date here, but this is through October 15th. So we'll have that passage come through, and then we'll likely see that uptick in activity. So as we move towards right smack dab, that second to third week of October, that's when we'll start to look to see if we are going to have the development. And then soon, maybe over the next week or so, ensembles might start to catch on that, okay, hey, we have something weird going on here, something anomalous going on. I think we can get some tropical development, and then we'll start to see ensemble members come on board. We'll keep you posted on that. If you found this content helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to stay updated on the rest of hurricane season and the weather in general, you have to hit subscribe. Please do that, and we will catch you next time.